Welcome to Movie Review Mom. I have a really special guest with me here today named Addison Foskey.
Hello, how are you?
Actually, I shouldn't be pointing that way because I'm not sure if you're going to be that side of me or this side of me when I edit it.
Go both.
There he is. Or how about that? Yes, Addison was an actor in the movie Prolonged Exposure, which I recently reviewed. And if you haven't seen it, it will follow this interview. So I highly recommend the movie. We're going to talk about the movie, talk about his acting career, and talk about a really interesting YouTube video he made. So with that, first, give us a quick nutshell about how you even got started in the acting business.
It was completely coincidental. I had never really acted in high school or in school. I've done a couple skits, but no plays or anything. But I lived in Clovis, New Mexico at the time, and a movie called Hell or High Water came to shoot certain scenes. I don't know if you've seen it. It was actually an Oscar contender for Best Picture a couple of years back. But I came in just to do a background role. I had never spent any time on a set. I thought it'd be exciting. And I got called back a couple of times, ended up as Ben Foster's stand-in for a bit. And that was, I mean, it was life-changing in a lot of ways because I had never been involved with any of that, but every bit of it fascinated me so much that I just started looking for more roles. And before I knew it, I jumped out of background. I was doing pretty much just speaking roles and catching every audition I could. And then Travis's Prolonged came along. And that was, I mean, prior to that, okay, so Prolonged was, I believe it was a 97-page script. Murdoch's character had lines on every single page. I was a little bit overwhelmed when I was looking at it the first time, because prior to that, 2-3 pages max is what I had done in a speaking role. So this was just a whole new world in a heartbeat. There was no transition time for me.
Yeah,
but
you are the heartbeat of the movie, aren't you?
I mean, I wouldn't like to. Travis is the heartbeat of the movie. I might be the person who's seen on the screen the most, but I mean, this was Travis Thoms. He was the producer, executive producer. He was the director. I mean, he ran the gamut of what get the set like you usually find with indie films. But this was something that was very near and dear to his heart because he's also a therapist. I think you actually pointed that out in your review as well. And so it was kind of fascinating to see not only more of the film side of things, but how somebody else handled it, how somebody who was extremely passionate about what he was directing really handled a set. It was great. Travis was awesome.
So give us a quick synopsis of the movie in case people haven't seen it, and then they're going to want to see it after they hear what you say.
Hopefully, anyway. So I play a character called Murdoch Lane, or named Murdoch Lane. He's a therapist. He's got kind of an injured past of his own. He lives alone. He has his office set up in his house, so his patients come to see him. And then other than his one friend, who also happens to be his personal therapist, the man doesn't really have much of a life beyond that. If you're looking for an uplifting film, this really isn't it. Because Murdoch isn't a funny guy. He's in some ways he's not even overly likable because he is so withdrawn and he has so many demons that he fights. And then he spends his entire day listening to other people's problems and trying to help them out. These things just compound to make this guy a pretty sad sack. And then I won't give anything away, but the movie doesn't really end happily for Murdoch either. I mean, again, I can't really say a whole lot, but I would venture to say that he's almost worse off by the end of it than he started with. So this isn't an uplifting Disney piece. I know in your review you mentioned how kids might not enjoy the length of it. That's very true because you kind of get to see his pain just drawn out. And but it's
Prolonged.
all, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said, you said it's drawn out. I said prolonged. It's called prolonged exposure, named after a type of therapy technique, actually. But I thought that you're right. The pain is prolonged. It's very insightful. He's a better man in the end for lessons learned. Not necessarily that he changes his lifestyle completely, but he does have a little character arc, wouldn't you say?
Yes, there's definitely a character arc to him. You can see it throughout the film, and it's again, it's one of those prolonged character arcs. There aren't any spikes. There's not crazy highs and crazy lows in this movie for the most part, but it does keep that burn all the way through. It's like, there's something happening. You don't know what, and quite honestly, Prolonged is one of those films that you need to pause if you want to run and grab a snack, because there are little tiny snippets all the way through that if you miss these 3 words said by this person in this particular order, it's going to make it a lot harder to figure out who done it.
Right. And it is a who done it. There is a crime involved. There's some mystery involved and intrigue. And it's not a big action thriller movie, but really a character study. But tell us about the movie poster.
Oh, so I was honored to star in a feature film that then got distribution. I don't know if Travis mentioned it or not, but Prolonged actually went overseas to South Korea and to Vietnam.
First.
And apparently there are copies of the movie floating around out there with the dubbed in Korean and Vietnamese, which I haven't seen yet, but I would like to see. But going back to the cover arts, the distribution company that got hold of this, and again, I was grateful to have a distribution company, but whoever put the cover art for the film together clearly didn't watch the movie, or they just had really high aspirations for what they were putting together, because it shows Dean Cain. He's got, if I recall, he's got a badge on his belt. He's got a pistol outstretched. There's a woman next to him. In some versions, it's a man, but in the main version, it's a woman, and she's holding a shotgun. Behind them, there's a helicopter flying majestically through the air. There's a building explosion, and down in the corner in red, it says "One hot team." Yeah, none of that is actually in the movie. There is a building explosion, but you don't actually see it. There are no helicopters. There is no woman with a shotgun. Dean is never seen holding or firing a gun or wearing a badge. And there is no hot team. So it's, I don't know where it came from, but I do want to apologize to anybody who bought or rented the movie thinking those elements would be specifically included. They are not. I think the cover art that Travis sent you, the dark piece with Dean in the car, the rain on the windshield, that's what should have been there. That was simple, that was telling, that was enough to make you question and wonder what's going on, versus whatever this other CGI stuff they put together was.
That's so funny. It is very misleading. And the director said, speaking about Dean Cain, that he was so impressed with him, what a stand-up guy he was, that he would be willing to do his movie, for relatively new actors and a young director as well, or new director in the industry. So what were your experiences as an actor working with Dean?
It was great. I didn't spend it wasn't weeks and weeks we were working together. I believe it was just a day that he was there, but it was a very long day. It was a funny story. He came and sat down next to me in the bedroom that was serving as a dressing room, and he pulled the script out. He looked at me and he said, "All right, let's learn these words." And I looked at him for a second and I'm like, okay, let's do that. Let's learn some words, Dean. So we sat and rehearsed for a while, and came out and did it, and he was fun. I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of the filming of Prolonged that I have. It almost seems like I blanked on. Everything was happening so quickly. We're working on such a truncated time scale that we were just back-to-back scenes all day. And it was, you know, several weeks that it was more fun than I possibly could have imagined. And, you know, I love everybody that I worked on set with, but yeah, it's, other than Dean being there and shooting a few of the scenes, I don't remember a ton of what we talked about. I know we talked about cars for a while, and you know, that was about it. But he was a very cool guy. Very. He was a lot of fun. He had a great sense of humor. You could see the experience with him. I mean, you have to get to a certain level of comfort in film before you can walk onto a set filled with people you don't know, and you are the star. I mean, he's on the front of all the posters, he's on the front of the DVDs for a reason, because nobody knows who I am, but they recognize his face. He was, I mean, he didn't show off. He wasn't conceited. He wasn't uptight. I mean, just taking pictures with everybody, signing autographs, and just smiling the whole time. So he was a good dude.
That's awesome. And you're right. Just his presence alone in the movie elevated the exposure, prolonged exposure for the film. Years ago, I lived in San Diego, and I had a talent agency call me and ask me to go out and be an extra in this movie. I didn't have any speaking lines or anything, but I was the wife of somebody who had speaking lines. And so that was really the first time I had ever been on a set. And it was really fun. There's lots of sitting around. Well, not for you, because you were in every scene basically. But you know, I was sitting around and then say, okay, hurry now. And then I'd do my little thing, and then I'd sit, and then we would do it, and the cameras would film backwards to get the different angles. How many times
The turnaround.
say you shot one scene? Like, was it one and done, or did you have to shoot it a bunch of times from different angles?
I mean, it's yeah. What you're referring to is called a turnaround, when they'll shoot the opposite side of the scene, and there were plenty of turnarounds because, as I think one thing you noticed there are a lot of talking heads in the movie. There is a lot of just back and forth talk. Every single time you do that, you've got to go through those lines twice. So if I mean, there were very few one and dones. Travis was not a stickler by any means, but he knew what he wanted to see. This was his vision. So there was never a question. If he said, I get it done this way, you have to have it done that way. If he didn't ever say, if I changed a line or changed a word or two in the dialogue and it didn't bother him, he'd let it go by. But I think, including the turnarounds, there was one scene we shot probably 16 times.
Oh.
Maybe 17. Just little things here and there. We'd lose a bit of audio, or there would be a fly or a truck in the background, or I would flub a line, or my co-star would flub a line. You know, it'd just be one little thing. But yeah, I mean, you go through scenes a lot when you do turnarounds like that. And I will let you in a little secret, the little notepad that I was scribbling in the whole time. Yeah, I wrote my lines in there prior to. There was,
Well, you had so many.
I don't think it's an industry secret. When you can hide your lines someplace, do it. But no, because it was just because I had so many scenes that I was not the pivotal individual. My patient was the pivotal individual. So my lines were more just kind of directing them onto their next line. But unfortunately, when you're directing somebody onto the next line, you have to give them what they've seen in the script as closely as you can. Otherwise, it's going to cause issues somewhere else. So I would just jot down the lines for the day, and as I was making my notes in the book, I would just kind of jot through them, little things like that. To just kind of help it through, because there were a lot of, you know, how are you? How do you feel about that? How does that make you feel? You know, how do you feel about that today? That I didn't want to start getting those out of line and start confusing the other actors. So I cheated a little.
Yeah, no, that's not a cheat. That's a helpful tip. And in fact, we do have some wannabe actors that watch this channel, as well as other actors and directors that are out there. But what other tips would you have for a new, young, up-and-coming actor that wants to get into the industry and start doing what you're doing?
I can really only speak from my point of view, but what I did, I started off in the background. And I was perfect. Background work is a ton of fun. Just like you were describing, you get to see what's going on. But when you're there as a background actor, not only pay attention to the rules that are given to you, because that's extremely important. They will fire you in a heartbeat without breaking a sweat if you don't abide by what they're telling you. Because productions are expensive things. There's a lot of money that goes into shooting every single scene. You don't want to be the one that causes them to have to do a reshoot. But observe. Play the part, but observe. Watch what's going on. The first time I walked onto set, I saw all these lights set up, and I had never seen anything just so amazing because I knew what they had done. I could look by seeing, okay, they've blocked out this window, but they've doubled the light over here, so they're trying to create a certain time of the day, either morning or evening. Bring that sun in, and they have coffee cups sitting around for everybody. Okay, so it is going to be a morning shot. Now that really doesn't change a ton of what you do, but if you know that it's a morning shot, by looking at the things, even if you haven't been told that, maybe throw a yawn into your background cross, just something to spice it up a little bit. If you can do more, try to be a stand-in. You will get unfettered access to everything that is happening between the actor and the director. And that's really where your learning comes in, because if everything is done properly, the actor will act, the director will direct, and the actor will act a second time. When they say moving on, that was what everybody wanted to see. And then you kind of mimic that activity in your own. What I did is I did background a few times. I got a couple stand-in things, enjoyed the heck out of it. Finally, I said, I feel like I'm ready for a speaking role. So I had no professional headshots. I had no resume. I just started submitting. And one production called me back, and I came in and I got the part. Very first audition, I got the part. And then there was and these are small things. This was the one that I got the part for. On this one, the movie never even got made. That doesn't diminish the fact that I still got the role. I still impressed them enough that they said, okay, even though you have absolutely no experience, why don't you try this? The next thing I auditioned for was a student film. No production's too small to go in there and get your hands dirty and learn something. And I auditioned for, and I got the role in the student film too. Then I had a third audition. I got that part. The fourth audition I didn't get, but I ended up snagging an agent out of it. And it just went straight from there. It wasn't years and years of doing it. It was me sitting down and really just trying to think about what's going to work. And what works for me, another, I'm not going to call it a pro tip because I'm hardly a pro, but another thing that I do is I'll read through a script, even prolonged, 6, 7, 8 times, depending on the amount of time I have to work with it. Not learning the lines, but picking up all the little nuances of my character and how he interacts with others, how he speaks, how he reacts to situations. And you put together this picture of a person in your head. And once you have a person, it's so much easier to try to, I don't necessarily try to become that person, but I try to take that person in, if that makes sense. Just try to embody the characteristics of what he does, because he responds to this person this way, he responds to that person that way, but when he's alone, this is what he thinks. Knowing all those little details right there, and again, you can study your script for your lines the night before. If you're a quick study, and you need to be a quick study if you want to be an actor, you need to be able to get those lines down. It's not just a matter of memorization, it's a matter of being able to impart feeling. But you work on your lines the night before, you go in the next day, even if you don't have them all in place, generally what's happening. You can carry on a conversation with somebody based on the situation that you're in. I would think that you should be able to. But just take that script in for everything that it's given. It's not a novel. It's not going to give you a ton of information about your character. It seems weird, but I mean, me saying Murdoch Lane is a therapist who lives alone because he has a tortured past and his best friend is his own therapist and he drives an old VW Bug. That doesn't tell you anything about who this person is. It tells you what they do. It tells you who their friends are. But you go in and you read the script as though it is a novel. As though you're looking for entertainment from this, you're not looking to learn from it necessarily. And once once you look at it as a piece of entertainment as you're reading it, then you just kind of get the pictures start play out in your head. And it's like, well, I can see how this guy is standing, how he's walking, where his eyes are pointing when he's making the statement. You know, what phrases he's not going to be able to look somebody in the eyes and say. He's going to have to look away when he says something because he's shy about this, that, or the other. If you get all those little bitty pieces put into place there, it's much easier to envelop that character.
Yeah, and for your character in Prolonged, you were wearing glasses. You carried yourself a certain way. What lessons would you say you learned from that character?
You know, there's a lot to be learned from Murdoch. And I'm not going to say a lot of it is what not to do, but a lot of it's what to look out for in yourself. Because again, as I said, he's not really a happy man overall. He's got a ton of his own demons running around. And at the same time trying to help others while he can't fix himself, even with help. It's a momentous task and one that should not be taken lightly by anybody. Now, Murdoch he's a pretty fair guy. He's a stand-up dude. He takes life as it comes at him, but he doesn't seem to be able to shed much of anything that's gone on. So it weighs over him like a cloud. There were a lot of running scenes that we did for this. I ran so much because that was one of Murdoch's character traits, is that he was taking up jogging just to get out of the house. We're not talking, he's not going to go to a club. He's not going to go to a bar. He's going to go out and run by himself. And most of the time when he's out running, he's wearing dark clothing. He's on the road alone. Even when he's out in public, this dude is just a solitary figure. And he has not only kind of become accustomed to that, but he almost welcomes it. The thought of there's I'll go ahead and say a love interest in the film that, despite knowing the out of bounds quality of this love interest, it still gets into Murdoch's head. And that's something that, of course, any therapist would eschew immediately, which he did. It's like, no, she's a client. But he couldn't stop going, well, the man doesn't meet anybody else. The man doesn't talk to anybody else. He talks to literally just therapists or people that are in therapy. I mean, that's it. He doesn't have any other outside contact. And when he does meet Dean Cain's character, Montenegro, he's not real happy to talk to him. Like, he'd prefer he was gone. So this man likes being alone. He likes being in control of his environment because he can't really control what's going on inside of his head or in his heart.
Would you say you're the complete opposite? Are you a social butterfly?
I'm not exactly a social butterfly. I don't mind being alone. It doesn't bother me, but I don't mind being out with people either, especially if it's a nice, comfortable, relaxed environment. I'm not exactly, well, of course, with coronavirus shutting everything down, there's nothing open. I couldn't go do anything if I wanted to, but I'm more the type that's going to go to a park and do some metal detecting. If I had a day out, then I would go spend time at a bar. But I'm also a huge dork. I should mention that. I love to metal detect.
Now, you live in New Mexico, and one thing I thought was pretty cool about the movie is that everybody other than Dean Cain were local actors, technicians, and all of that. So are all of the roles that you've been in so far all filmed in New Mexico?
Let's see. I had a modeling campaign that shot in Wyoming. But other than that one exception, everything's been in New Mexico, from Clovis to Albuquerque, down to, let's see, almost near El Paso, and then up to Farmington. So really just hitting every corner of the state there. I like shooting here. There's nothing you can't find here. You need a setting for a scene. We've got it. We have 12 of them, and they're all available right now.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, to tie that into your location, let's talk about that interesting YouTube video. Tell us about that. And I've got the link down below so you guys can find that.
Okay, so I moved into a home in Albuquerque recently. It's kind of in the downtown area with my girlfriend. And she had mentioned this before, but it had never crossed my mind that it might be nearly as interesting as it was. But she mentioned that the house had a bomb shelter in it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I come from Texas originally. There are tornado shelters everywhere. I just assumed this was this cinder block lined hole that somebody had dug in the ground. No. I can send you the Facebook link later if you'd like, where I have the still photos. But we went into this back closet of this house. We popped this. It was about a 90-pound solid wood hatch. It was backed by steel. And there is this tunnel, this tube that goes straight down into the ground. And then you step into this little, it's just a box. It's not even 6 foot tall, about 10 by 10, with 4 foot reinforced concrete walls and a 6 foot reinforced concrete roof and a secondary access tunnel and 2 different air intakes with an air pump that was actually called a bomb shelter ventilation system, because I found a letter from the original manufacturer where they had sent the purchaser a spare part that had been left off. So get a little more history on it. The home was built in 1951 by a doctor who worked at a local hospital. The hospital in turn was contracted by the federal government to perform survivability rating studies on bomb shelter designs. So the hospital sent this doctor to Nevada, where he witnessed dozens of atomic blasts. And then he would go in afterwards and check on the typically animal test subjects they would have inside of these shelters. He took the best shelter design, brought it back to Albuquerque, and put it underneath his house. This is not your grandma's bomb shelter. This is something that is, it still is useful today as it was then. In fact, there was a light bulb in the wall plugged into a socket that had been burning since 1961, but it was still on. It was still lit. And the entire time, it was just this crazy little thing. But it gets even better, because in the corner of the shelter, there is a pile of survival gear. There is a fallout jacket, which I was actually, through the Facebook link, I was contacted by a couple different museums who wanted to buy the fallout jacket because these apparently don't survive above ground. There was a radiation test kit, a family radiation test kit is what it was called, meant to be put into a bomb shelter. There was an 11.5-pound tin of freeze-dried food that was sitting in the corner, still ready for use. And I didn't open it in the video, but in the YouTube post, I did. That YouTube post got shared 6,000 times. It was the closest thing I've ever come to anything viral. But then through a share of the YouTube post, we actually got in touch with the former owner's daughter, who was able to fill us in with all sorts of information we didn't have before, such as how the secondary exit hatch was raised, because we found that later too. You'll see it in the video. There was a casita added onto the house in 1980 that covered up where the secondary exterior exit to the bomb shelter would have been. We were doing some renovations, ripped up some carpet, and we found it. So everything was still intact for this shelter, and it was a step back in time. I mean, there's a thermometer on the wall, been sitting at 67 degrees for the last 60 years. This place has not moved. It's just as close to untouched as you can get. It's amazing.
That is amazing. All right. And so just so everybody knows, be sure and subscribe to Addison's YouTube channel. And of course, subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. Ring that little bell and that'll notify you every time I upload a new video. Addison, I could talk to you all day long about your acting career, all the stuff going on, this Cold War bomb shelter. That alone is super interesting. Tell us real quickly what your next project is before we let you go.
Well, I have no idea what my next project is. I actually reached out to the Facebook film community here in New Mexico and said, hey, I'm dying to do some acting. Somebody send me monologues. And so I recorded one last night. I'm going to shoot another one here in a couple of days. But I've actually been kind of on lockdown with all the COVID craziness with my 2-year-old since the beginning of March. So I think I'm past the point of losing my mind, spending 24/7 with a toddler. So yeah, no, I don't know what the next project is going to be, but holy crap, I'm looking forward to it. I've been submitting. I just, want to see what's going on, and hopefully we'll get something that can let us move on past this and get back to normal life. As it is, I don't know if you've seen anything about the new coronavirus regulations that are happening on film sets. I'm super happy we're going to be able to get back and shoot again, but it's going to be a very, very different picture now.
Yeah, well, obviously the whole world has changed. Hopefully, we all hope and pray things are going to get better. But if they don't, you've got a bomb shelter.
That I do. If worse comes to worse, I can just go downstairs.
Exactly. That's kind of cool, actually. Fill it up with a bunch of food storage and you're good to go, or good to stay.
Yeah. Call it good. Stay downstairs.
Well, Addison, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend a few minutes with us. We wish you the best of luck. I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. And for those of you who haven't seen the movie Prolonged Exposure, keep watching after this, and then that little movie review will start up. All right. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll be in touch some more for your next movie.
Yeah, glad. Love to talk again. It was great talking to you.
Thanks.
Bye.